Questioning the science is settled climate change narrative. It's not settled. That's the thing. And if these elites, like the people from the United Nations, actually believed in what they were saying about climate change, then they would not be cutting down 100,000 trees in the Amazon. They wouldn't be flying around on their private jets. They would be flying commercial. They wouldn't have multiple homes. I say this time and time again. So we all know it's a farce. I don't know if this video is going to stay up because I said that, but I could go into more detail and show studies and stuff pertaining to this. But I can't do it here on this platform. Check me out on my Patreon where I show studies and talk about it. But Joe Rogan's guests actually break this down. The way he articulate this is amazing. So we're going to play this clip. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. There's a link to my Patreon, what I alluded to a minute ago. That's where I talk about things that I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my X account, so follow me there as well. All right, so let's get right to the clip. Here we go. Shout out Joe Rogan.
Rogan experience.
No, what happened was there was, I would say, with the first Earth Day, 1970, there was a real change in the environmental movement. It began to focus much more strongly on the energy sector and much less on saving the whales. And there was a big difference. I mean, the energy sector involved trillions of dollars. The whales, not so much.
Right.
And at that time, it was cooling, this global mean temperature, which doesn't change much.
And he was he was in the inception of all of this climate change stuff. Because remember, it used to be cold. They were talking about, oh, we gotta do something because the planet is gonna freeze. Then they flipped it and started saying, oh, the planet is gonna burn. We're gonna get too hot. We ain't gonna be able to do anything. We're not going to be able to grow plants and stuff like that. So they flipped the script.
But, you focus on 1 degree, a half degree, so it looks like something. And it was cooling from the 1930s. 1930s were very warm, and it was getting cooler until the 70s. And that's why they were saying, well, this is going to lead to an ice age. And they focused on that for a while. And then in the 70s, and at that time, well, what do you say? If you're worried about an ice age, they said, well, it'll be the sulfates emitted by coal burning because that reflects light, and the less light that we get, the colder we'll get. But then the temperature stopped cooling in the 70s and started warming. And that's when they said, well, you have to scare people with warming, and you can't use the sulfates anymore. But the scientist called Suki Manabe showed that even though CO2 doesn't do much in the way of warming, doubling it will only give you a half degree or so. But if you assumed that relative humidity stayed constant so that every time you warmed a little, you added water vapor, which is a much more important greenhouse gas, you would double the impact of CO2, which now gives you a degree, which still isn't a heck of a lot, but still it was saying you could increase it. And that's when people started saying, well, now we better find CO2. It's increased because of industrialization and so on. And that began the demonization of CO2.
Do you think there's just always people that are going to point to anything like this that's difficult to define and use it to their advantage?
Of course they are. That's what they're doing.
And this was a particular case. You wanted to deal, the energy sector is trillions of dollars. Anything you can do to overturn it, change it, replace fossil fuels, it's big bucks.
Right.
And one of the odd things, I think, in politics, I don't see it studied much, Congress can actually give away trillions of dollars. if you look at the McKinsey report on, eliminating CO2, net zero, they're saying it'll cost hundreds of trillions of dollars. Well,
Think about that. And how do you get net zero? How do you eliminate CO2 altogether? If we eliminate CO2 altogether, no trees, no plants, no vegetation, it's a ridiculous concept that they push.
if you're giving out that much, you don't need that much of your politician. All you need is millions for your campaigning. And all you're asking are the recipients of people who are getting the money that you are giving them, 0.5%, 0.25%, you're golden.
Yeah, so basically our politicians are selling us out for pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar, selling us this bull crap. It's ridiculous.
So that's much better than giving out 100,000 and having all of it back.
Well, the key, though, is also making it a subject that you cannot challenge. There's no room for any rational debate, and if you discuss it at all, you are now a climate change denier.
Yeah.
Not only that, is they censor you. Like, I can't even say my real true thoughts on climate change because I'm afraid of being censored from. I'm afraid of being booted from the platform. That's why we have to go to places like Patreon. Even though YouTube is pretending like, you know, they've gotten a little bit more lax and giving people their channels back and stuff like that, people like me won't forget. we still going to continue to use Patreon and stuff like that because we just can't trust it. You can't even have a civil debate on these type of topics. But they call it science, though. It's science that you can't debate. How can you call it science if you can't even debate the issue? That's a religion. It's a cult, is what it is.
Which is like being an anti-vaxxer or, fill in the blank with whatever other horrible thing you could be called.
Now, that's a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, I was looking at it. On the one hand, you're told the science is settled. Thousands of the world's leading climate scientists all agree, which often makes you wonder. I mean, you went to college. How many climate scientists did you know? I mean, well, a dozen.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you read the IPCC reports, they're pointing out, for instance, that water vapor and clouds are much bigger than CO2, and we don't understand them at all. So here you have the biggest phenomena we don't understand at all, but the science is settled. Who knows what that means?
Well, it's also this very bizarre dynamic of the Earth's temperature itself, which has never been static.
No.
Never.
How would it remain static? That would involve a hugely reactive system.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But everyone seems to be buying this narrative that the science is settled and the Earth is warming. We have to act now.
You say everyone. I'm not so
I don't
sure.
say everyone. A lot of politicians.
A lot
in
of
particular.
politicians are very attractive to this because it gives them power.
Right, and it's hard to define.
Yeah.
And you can argue, and if you argue against it, you're a bad person.
Well,
That's a good one.
you do all that, but we spend part of a year in France. My wife is French. Ordinary people, once you get to the countryside, don't take this all that seriously.
Right.
Here too, I suspect ordinary people have more skepticism than many people who are more educated.
Yes, but unfortunately, these ordinary people sometimes are impacted by these politicians' decisions where they have to, in the UK, they were getting rid of cows. They were forcing people to kill cows.
They're paying 3 times more for their heating and their electric bills.
Right.
I mean, it makes people poorer. It's making it almost impossible to electrify parts of the world that need it. And that involves billions of people. No, I mean, it's doing phenomenal damage and pain. But, I think for politicians and for many people who are well off, they need something that gives meaning to their life. And saving the planet seems sufficiently grandiose for their ambitions.
How are these net zero policies stopping people from getting electricity?
Well, by making it expensive, by eliminating fossil fuels. fossil fuels are cheaper. At least the experience in the UK is when you switch to, quote, renewables, it tripled the price of electricity.
Right, but what I'm talking about is like third world countries, parts of the world that are undeveloped.
They can't afford it.
And that's all it is. They can't afford it.
Yeah.
But they also, if they didn't follow these net zero policies, what kind of plants are we talking about? Are we talking about coal plants?
Coal, anything, whatever
Right.
is available.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you
essentially.
think even though coal does pollute the environment and it releases particulates, right? That's an issue,
Should
right?
real clean.
How shall I put it? It's always a matter of cost. We have a plant, I think, in Alabama that has basically as clean as any other plant that burns coal.
Yeah.
You can clean.
You can clean it up, and it'll just spew out water vapor. I mean, we have the technology for that. Those coal plants can be very environmentally safe.
You can scrub it. You can get rid of almost everything except CO2.
Okay, so the particulates aren't as big of an issue as they used to be in the past. Is that
I
what it is?
agree.
They're more efficient. Okay.
Yeah.
So this net zero thing is stopping them from installing modernized coal plants in parts of the world that do not have electricity, and the overall net negative weighs much heavier in not bringing these coal plants in.
I think so.
And not bringing these people into the first
Yeah,
world.
and there are, of course, the alternative natural gas and so on, which are
Natural
available in
gas is very
places.
clean.
There are places where you're lucky, like in Norway or Canada, Quebec, where you have hydro, which is intrinsically clean. But there's a problem with politicians. I remember once being in D.C. and some Republican politicians came and said, "You know what we just did? We banned incandescent light bulbs."
Ridiculous.
They said, "Wasn't that a great thing?" I said, "That's the stupidest thing I've heard today. What's the point?" Because at the time, what was replacing it? Compact fluorescents, which were awful.
Yeah.
All they had to do was wait and do nothing, and LEDs would come along, and people would say, "Okay, I prefer that."
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they feel they have to do something.
And they would switch to fluorescents, which turned out to be terrible for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So incandescents aren't bad for you?
They were simply less efficient than in terms of the number of watts of heat they generate versus light. I mean, LEDs are phenomenal that way.
Right. They're the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when they have these decisions that they make like that do turn out to be negative ultimately, and that yet people still allow them to make silly decisions that don't seem to be making sense.
Yeah, I think there's an old cliche, money is the root of all evil.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. This is the disturbing thing that I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting, especially a lot of very polite, educated people that have followed the narrative that you follow if you're a good person and if you're a person who trusts science. And that is that, like, we have a serious problem. We have to address it now, or there will be no America for our grandchildren. This is the thing that we keep
hearing. You
hearing.
mentioned a tough thing there, the business trust science.
Yes.
It's not a great idea because science is not a source of authority. It's a methodology. It's based on challenge.
Right.
And so
where did this narrative come from then? Trust the science.
The success
Fauci.
of science. In other words, this is a relatively new way to approach the world. I mean, a few hundred years.
These political scientists, I don't mean poli-sci, I mean like these scientists that are political, they came in and they were like, trust the science, because they were upset that people was questioning stuff like the COVID-19 jab and stuff like that. And they want you to blindly listen to whatever they say. So that's where they came up with the trust the science stuff, where science was never to be trusted. Science is always to be questioned. That's what makes it scientific. You test and retest and retest to verify. That's what science is about. And then they go and say, no, just trust the science. And then when you go and look at the science and you go and you look at the studies and the things behind it, and you call out the contradictions because you read it on your own, you get censored for it. It's crazy.
And the notion is, and I think it's been stated many times, you test things, and if they fail to predict correctly, they're wrong. So
That's
you
what I
find out
just
what's
alluded
wrong
to.
with them. You don't fudge them, or you don't change the rules. It's led to immense improvements in life, development of all sorts of things,
Yeah.
and so it has a good reputation. Politicians have less of a reputation, so they wish to co-opt the reputation of science.
Yes, that's a
True.
very
That's
good
it.
point, because try
That's-
finding a good politician that everybody agrees is rock solid. You can find plenty of science that everybody thinks is amazing.
Yeah.
Cell phone technology, nuclear power, so many things that people go, that's incredible that they did that.
Well, that's also confusing technology with
right.
science.
The result of science.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which is also an issue, right? And when you can get politicians to attach themselves to narratives that are supposedly connected to science.
You mentioned Gore at the beginning.
Yes.
Oh God.
You know, with that thing, he was showing this cycle of ice ages and CO2 and temperature going together. And it never bothered him that the temperature changed first and then the CO2.
Yeah, Greg Braden was on the podcast recently. He was explaining
Yeah.
there have been times where the CO2 was much higher in the atmosphere, but the temperature was colder.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I pointed out before. I think on one of my Patreon videos pertaining to this whole global warming thing, is that they say that the CO2 makes the temperature rise, when in fact the studies are showing that the temperature happens first. The temperature rise happens first, then the CO2 starts to rise. That's right.
So it's not like we can point to, like, look at the dinosaurs. We don't want to live the way the dinosaurs lived. Look how much CO2 they had. Like, and then the other really inconvenient thing with CO2 is that the Earth is actually greener than it has been
Way
in a
greener.
long time.
I mean, I think we'll speak to that. But I mean, essentially, the increased amount of CO2 in the industrial era has added greatly to the arable land.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there's a
They call
funny
it de-desertification or something like that, where the desert is actually turning green. For deserts that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years are now starting to grow plants and stuff because of the high concentrations of CO2.
story. Do you know the name E.O. Wilson? Have you ever heard that name?
I do. I have heard it, but I don't know where.
He was a biologist at Harvard. He wrote about sociobiology. His specialty were ants and bees and things, social insects. And he was giving a talk, and it came up for reasons that were not obvious to me. He was talking about the population of humanoids. And he was mentioning that you go back, a few 100,000 years, and you began the first humanoids, and they got to about a few million. But then during the last glacial maximum, the numbers went down to tens of thousands. There was a complete wipeout of humans. So I asked him afterwards, I said, do you think this could have anything to do with the fact that CO2 is so low that there was no food? And his response was to turn around and walk away.
That's an inconvenient
Of course,
truth, sir. It's just, to me, it's very strange to see an almost unanimous acceptance of that we have settled this, that the science is settled, from so many people on both the left and in academia, and even on the right. There's a lot of people on the right that believe that.
Yeah, I know. And it should be the first thing that makes you suspicious.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. There's a consensus.
Facts.
Yeah, I mean, this
Especially
is not
about
how
something
science
that's
is done.
Something that's never static.
Facts. Wow. I love that. I love that. Y'all know how I feel about the whole global warming thing. All you have to do is just read a little bit and you can find out that this, what the scientists been telling us about this whole thing. The studies actually contradict everything they've been saying about this. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. Leave y'all comments down below. like, share, and subscribe, and check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.